It's been a hard day and night, and I've been working like a dog.
Are you ready to get down to business? Join seasoned entrepreneur, community leader, and Army veteran Scott Shalom Klein, who will take you behind the scenes with those who work in America's small business scene and speak with leaders making an impact, creating jobs, and telling their story in entrepreneurship. So let's get down to business. On AM 560, The Answer, here's your host, Shalom Klein.
And indeed, we're all about small business, jobs, and entrepreneurship and business. We talk all about small business here. As always, you get on my website, syklein.com, or of course, check us out on your favorite podcast app. I'm super excited for today's conversation because I'm joined by a board-certified endocrinologist and a premier expert in emotional intelligence who's tackling one of the most urgent crises in modern medicine, clinician burnout. Dr. Mickey Lebowitz has navigated nearly every facet of the medical world, from physician-owned practices and the VA system to his current role as a chief medical officer. He's the author of the new book, The EQ Prescription: Put Yourself First to Thrive in Healthcare. Again, the EQ Prescription: Put Yourself First to Thrive in Healthcare. Dr. Lebowitz argues that while eating and sleeping well are important, they aren't enough to survive the overwhelming pressures of the healthcare system. And he has developed a groundbreaking framework called the EQ Zone to give professionals real-time strategies to manage stress when the heat is on. Welcome to the show, Mickey.
Thank you. Thank you, Shalom. Thanks for inviting me. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. As mentioned, you've been a physician, a medical quality director, and a chief medical officer. At what point in your own career did you realize that eating well and exercising simply wasn't enough to keep a healthcare professional from burning out?
Well, that's a great question. I learned that the hard way back in 2007 when I was beaten down, broken up, and frankly burnt out from the healthcare system. And I felt so impassioned by the whole thing. My expectations weren't met, that I wrote a book called Losing My Patience and Why I Quit My Medical Practice at that particular time. And I felt like I needed to give voice to the people who were in the what I call the trenches, seeing patients all day, every day, and not thriving in the practice. And I frankly left my practice because of the healthcare system and how it was impacting me, and my expectations weren't met. And I said, there's got to be a better way than what we're doing now. And that's when I came up with this EQ prescription that I wrote about just recently.
We're going to dive deep into it. So you've introduced this concept. It's called the EQ Zone. Can you walk us through what that zone looks like and how a nurse or a doctor can utilize it in real time when they are in the middle of a high pressure shift?
Absolutely. What I did is I took two well-known concepts. One is called emotional intelligence, which was made famous back in the 1990s by John Mayer, P. Salve, and then Dan Goldman, who wrote a book, Emotional Intelligence, and Why It Matters Even More Than Intellectual Intelligence, or IQ. And I combined that with another known concept called the resiliency zone, which was made famous by Elaine Miller-Harris. And she was working with first responders like policemen, firemen, EMT, and paramedics, and helping them through the traumas that they saw all day, every day. So the zone is really just a visual of two horizontal lines. And when you're between those two horizontal lines, you're your best self and people see you as your best self. And then naturally, as the day goes on, there are things in life that will narrow your zone, like not having enough sleep or not eating right or having too much to do than time allows. And there are things that are going to widen your zone, like getting enough sleep and eating well, and maybe even getting a compliment. So then the question is, how do you know if you're in your zone or not? And that's when I put emotional intelligence and connected it to this resiliency zone, this zone concept, and came up with this transformative novel idea called the emotional intelligence zone. It's something you can use in real time when the heat is on. And frankly, in healthcare, the heat is always on.
It is. Yeah. This is a transformative process for sure. Many healthcare workers feel that the pressures of the system are entirely out of their control. How does your framework empower them to find agency in a system that often feels just overwhelming?
Right. Well, if you are doing in the heat of the battle, which we are, like I said, frequently during the course of your day, then you could pause and do what I call a check-in and say to yourself, hey, my zone is narrow, my zone is wide, or I'm even bumped out of my zone. And if you can do that, then you can say, well, why am I narrow, or why am I bumped out of my zone at this particular time? It's recognizing, identifying, and understanding what your emotions are at that particular moment. And then the next step would be, how do you manage yourself to either widen your zone or get back in your zone so you can be your best, to give your best to your patients, the care that they want and receive and that you want to deliver. So if you could just picture this visual and all day, every day, and do this check-in, which only takes a minute, or a moment. You don't have to sit by a river and chant some mantra, which you can do if you like, but we typically don't have time to do that. So this is a really nice, easy thing to do moment to moment during the roller coaster of your day.
You mentioned that your framework isn't just for individuals, it's actually for organizational culture as well. How can a hospital leader use the EQ prescription to change the environment for their entire staff? And essentially, we could substitute that for our listeners that might be in a different field.
Absolutely. Well, that's really glad. I'm really glad you said that, because the information in the book is, even though it's written for people in healthcare, it's very transferable. It can be used in all walks of life. In fact, a friend of mine who's a physician said, I use it when I'm in the office, but when I get home, I should use it also when I take care of my kids, and I should check in and pause, and so I could be my best self and be the best parent I could be. So for people who are in health or not in healthcare, they could use this information just as well. And leaders, to your question, set the tone of the organizations. And if the leaders are able to manage themselves and manage relationships and get what they want and what the organization wants and want to avoid, then that could really have a great impact on the culture and the climate of organizations. Again, leaders set the tone, and if the leaders are erratic and they can't, there's no consistency, it makes it really hard to stay in that, to stay for that organization to stay in their zone and be their best selves.
In your book, you tell readers to put yourself first. That kind of feels counterintuitive to someone whose entire career is dedicated to patient care. Why is that self-first mindset actually better for the patient in the long run?
Yeah, I know what you're saying. It sounds like heresy, right? Because don't patients come first? And for most people, that sounds like the right thing to do. But the gist of the book is that you can't give your best care unless you're your best self. And if your zone is narrow, you're bumped out of your zone, the physiology is that you can't do your best thinking, because when you're in fight or flight, bumped out of your zone or a narrow zone, then that blood flow that normally goes to the part of your brain that does its best thinking goes to the parts of your body, like your muscles, to allow you to fight or flight. So you can't do your best unless you take care of yourself first. And then you'll be able to give the care that the patients want to receive and you want to deliver. So there's a whole physiology behind it.
Yeah. How does emotional intelligence actually improve decision-making? And I'll actually bring it back to the medical field. Does a higher EQ actually lead to better medical outcomes?
Oh, no, there's no question about it. The higher EQ will enhance job satisfaction, patient outcomes, less risk of malpractice, because you're making better decisions and developing greater relationships with your patients. You'll be less likely to burn out. As you bring up, you'll have better leadership, better organizational cultures and climate, making it easier to recruit and retain staff. There's so many wonderful benefits about being in EQ, and the reason why you make better decisions is because you know what you want, and you know what you want to avoid, and you're able to recognize what you think and you feel, and if you know how you think and you feel, you're better apt to make decisions. If you're making decisions without knowing what you think and you feel, what you want and you don't want, then you might make decisions that are not in alignment with that. So there's great, benefit to being self-aware, because it leads to better decisions and better outcomes.
Absolutely. I'm chatting with the author of the EQ Prescription, Put Yourself First to Thrive in Healthcare. And that is Dr. Mickey Lebowitz. Mickey, just before we come to the end of our conversation, of course, we make our listeners aware of where they can find the book. For those listeners who are feeling identity fatigue or are considering leaving, let's talk the medical profession today, what's the very first step that they can take within the EQ zone, start thriving again?
Well, the first step they could do is to pick up the book and recognize that emotional intelligence is a competency, and by definition, competencies are things that you can get better at Although it comes down to this old riddle, which is how many psychiatrists does it take to change a light bulb? And the answer is one, but the light bulb has to want to change. So if you are interested in being able to better manage yourself, which is the only thing you can manage, because we can't change the healthcare system. I wish I could. I would do it in a heartbeat. But the only thing that you can really control is yourself. So knowing what you can control, what you can't control, and the difference between that is really the art of this whole thing. So the first step is to recognize that you can get better at this if you want to.
Yeah.
And
Nikki, how can we find the book?
You can find the book on all of Amazon and every other place that books are sold. It's an Audible, it's ebook, and the Audible is my voice, by the way. So if you like listening to my voice now, you'll like it even more in the book.
So this is just the teaser. I love it, Mickey. Again, Dr. Mickey Lebowitz, really, really enjoyed the conversation. We'll link in the show notes, make it really easy. And come back real soon. Appreciate your passion and your subject matter expertise. We're going to squeeze in a quick break here on the show all about small business, jobs, and entrepreneurship. We'll be right back.